While tidying up the bedroom for my favorite boy, I accidentally knocked over the trash can. A sticky mess rolled out, half wrapped in paper towels. It looked like it hadn't been used for long, maybe last night. Maybe this morning. I can't describe the moment. I was helping Ryan clean up his bedroom when my mom called. Since last month, Ryan had put the family's spare key in my hands. During this time, I've been coming over almost every day. Although he hadn't formally asked, we seemed to have an unspoken understanding of the relationship. After the usual questions about trivial matters in my life, my mom suddenly mentioned that Zoe had returned to China. My hand, which was wiping the nightstand, jerked to a halt the moment I heard the name. And the next second, I quickly turned off the speakerphone. Through the crack in the hidden door, I saw Ryan sitting on the couch, quietly playing with his cell phone. The expression on his face was the usual calm indifference, unperturbed. Shouldn't have heard, did I? Thought? Relieved. I lowered my voice and asked my mom, isn't she getting married next month? Why did she suddenly come back to China? You don't know. On the other end, my mom seemed to hesitate for a moment, wanting to say something. Finally, she sighed and told me that Zoe's boyfriend had been cheating on her before the wedding, and she caught him red-handed, so naturally the marriage was not going to happen. These two simple words have completely disconcerted me. Although Zoe is my cousin, she is actually only a few months older than me. The two of us grew up playing together. Listening to my mom say she encountered this kind of thing, my heart is not good either. On the other hand, Zoe was the only girlfriend Ryan ever admitted to during his entire college years. That time, I was at best a close classmate of Ryan. After learning that Ryan and Zoe were in a relationship, I intentionally kept a distance from them. But every time I ran into Zoe at family gatherings, she would always talk to me about Ryan, both intentionally and unintentionally. The most common thing she said was that it was thanks to me that she was able to meet such a nice guy like Ryan. Later, I realized that she had seen how much I liked Ryan, but she just wanted to make me see it in this way. This twisted approach continued until just before graduation. After graduation, Zoe decided to go abroad for further study and broke up with Ryan. Ryan was depressed for a long time. During that time, I was by Ryan's side, watching him get drunk and then get over it a little bit. Maybe it was because of that time that Ryan treated me a little differently than he did other people. When it came to Zoe's boyfriend cheating, my mom got more and more agitated and her voice got louder and louder. Afraid of being overheard by Ryan, I couldn't help but turn my head and look at him through the doorway. Ryan was teasing his cat. His head was lowered, his long fingers running along the kitten's spine as he slowly and methodically smoothed its fur. The profile of his side face to his neckline was very superior, but his face was still expressionless. The kitten lazily crouched beside him, half squinting its eyes in an expression of enjoyment. This 8-month-old ragdoll cat was a gift I gave to Ryan 6 months ago when I heard the news of Zoe's engagement and finally mustered up the courage to confess to him. He accepted my gift that day and named the kitten Machi on the spot, saying it was soft and small like me. When he said this, his eyes rare tenderness, the corner of his mouth contains a light smile, more firm my courage to confess, probably sensing what I was going to say. Ryan suddenly turned his head sideways to avoid my gaze, his voice slightly deep. Jess, wait a little longer, okay? My heart went cold. Maybe that's when I suddenly realized that even if Zoe had a boyfriend and was so close that she was about to get married, Ryan would still be willing to wait for her, just like I was willing to wait for him. Jess, a reminder from my mom pulled my thoughts back. Fixing my mind, I casually replied back to my mom, but didn't take my eyes off Ryan in the living room. He seemed to be on the phone with someone right now as well, a faint smile at the corners of his mouth at all times. A strong sense of crisis rose suddenly in my heart. The corners of Ryan's lips suddenly moved slightly as he seemed to pronounce a name. You. My mom was still saying something on the other end. I was just staring blankly, and my forehead was suddenly throbbing, and my palms were cold. The trash can next to the bed was suddenly tripped over by little Machi, who ran in. When I went to help the trash can, a Trojan box suddenly rolled out of it. Along with it, there was a sticky mess, half wrapped in tissue paper. It looked like it hadn't been there long. Maybe last night, maybe this morning. That moment, I can't tell you what kind of mood I was in, but I was still able to numbly pull the paper towel from the bedside and throw this pile of stuff back into the trash can one by one. Why Mom's voice came from the other end of the line. Your aunt said that you was in a bad mood and wanted to take a break, so she bought a ticket yesterday and flew you here. She should have arrived last night. She didn't contact you? Almost instantly, I remembered that I had called Ryan a dozen times last night, and no one had answered. Until I came over today, Ryan hadn't had a word of explanation for me. Everything was already clear. Zoe really didn't contact me last night. And the person she did contact turned out to be Ryan. I don't know how I hung up the phone and walked out of the bedroom. The moment I met Ryan's gaze, I froze for a moment, and before I could ask any probing questions, had already given me the order to leave. I have something to do later, Jessica, you go home first. The unconscious indifference in his tone made my heart feel like it was being clutched, making it hard to breathe. I lowered my head, my fingers sinking heavily into my palm. After my failed confession half a year ago, I curled up under the covers and covered my head, telling myself over and over again that it was time to let go. When I woke up, I went about my daily routine of work and life, only never looking for him again, until 2 months ago when I almost got lost in the mountains. The moment he found me, Ryan hugged me tightly for the first time. His hot breath fell on my neck as he called my name urgently, Jessica. Jess. I could feel his worry, his body trembling slightly. After that, our relationship skyrocketed. He even gave me the spare key to his house. I thought this time I could finally get what I wanted. Unexpectedly, Zoe and her boyfriend broke up. The one who got what he wanted was Ryan. Now, Ryan is back to his old self, refusing to let me in. As if the tender ambiguity of the past 2 months was all my own illusion, the sound of the door lock turning came from outside, pulling me back to reality. Zoe stood in the doorway, her eyes complex as she looked our way. Her eyes were tinged with a bit of embarrassment and some cavernous guilt and pity. It made me feel like there was a smothering blockage in my chest, sticky and heavy, and I couldn't catch my breath. Zoe saw me, then looked at Ryan, hesitated for a second, and immediately explained that she had come in a hurry last night, and that Ryan had been kind enough to take her in. She came over here because she left something in the guest room last night. Zoe emphasized the word guest room as she said this. After a moment, Ryan said, "Okay, I'll bring it to you." I listened silently to their clumsy speech and pulled the corner of my lips stiffly. My eyes flicked over to see the familiar set of keys in Zoe's hand. A buzz went through my head. Looks like even this one, I'm not the only one. Ryan soon emerged from the room with a bag. As Zoe reached for the bag, Ryan suddenly took hold of her wrist. I thought the doctor said the symptoms were mild. Why aren't the allergies gone? His brow was furrowed, but his tone was soft. This kind of soft-spoken thoughtfulness was something Ryan hadn't given me even during the 2 months he and I were most flirtatious. Zoe's wrists were white and had some red rashes, so small they were barely noticeable. She raised her eyebrows slightly and smiled at Ryan. "It's almost healed. It's not swollen anymore." Ryan stared at her closely, the tight line of his lips finally loosening. "That's good." The two just stood in the living room talking as if no one else was there. It made me go into a slight trance for a moment. Ryan always seemed to be like this when it came to her. Every word, every look carried passionate affection, very different from the perfunctory way he treated me. Then the two broke up and Ryan pretended he'd let go, but refused to let anyone get close. Now, they're back together. Ryan was finally able to remove the layers of pretense and almost deliberately, forcefully, let Zoe know that he didn't want to lose her again. That moment, I clearly experienced a tickling jealousy. That moment. Machi rubbed up against my feet and started pampering himself, probably because he was starving, until I found cat food and fed Machi. Those two were still talking, not wanting to stay here and awkwardly watch them catching up on old times. I packed up my things and prepared to leave in a hurry. When I walked to the door, I thought for a moment and took out the spare key in my pocket and put it on the cabinet by the door. There were some things I didn't want to hear him say. It was too embarrassing. Instead, Ryan's voice suddenly came from behind me. "Zoe is allergic to cat hair." I turned my head to look at him, not understanding what he meant. Ryan raised his eyes just slightly, his tone light but sounding undoubted. "You take Machi. There was a moment of dead silence. I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what to say. I just looked at Ryan unconsciously. It turns out that when you're sad to the extreme, you can't even cry. Jess, don't misunderstand. My hand was suddenly held, and the warmth coming from my palm made me come to my senses. Zoe walked in front of me at some point. She patted the back of my hand soothingly, her tone low but gentle. Just now Ryan said that I'm new here, I don't have a place to stay, and it's not safe for me to stay in a hotel by myself, so he let me stay with him for a few days first. When I return from my trip, he'll bring Machi back. Saying that, she turned her head to look at Ryan and curled her lips. I didn't realize that after all these years, he's still so sweet. I looked at her and reacted, suddenly feeling a little amused. If there was anyone in the world who would stab me in the heart the most, it would have to be Zoe, even though I know she's innocent and unintentional. Unintentional, I supposed. I still remember at that time Ryan in the department is famous high cold. Good family, good looks, better. Just treat people too indifferent and detached, so that people dare not approach casually. I got to know Ryan very well because I was assigned to a group in the lab. During that time, I was very busy every day, and Zoe was so distressed that she came to the lab almost every day to bring me nutritious soup. Slowly, Ryan and Zoe started to cross paths, and the soup gradually changed from one serving to two. After they got together, Zoe joked that he didn't want to leave me out, and that he liked to ask me to do everything. After being rejected by me many times, Zoe stopped mentioning it. Once I was busy in the lab until late. Somehow I went out for dinner with them. Zoe and I were chatting and didn't notice that Ryan had ordered 3 scallion oil noodles. Zoe loved the noodles, but she didn't like the scallions. She frowned a little, but didn't say anything, picking up her chopsticks and sucking on the noodles in small bites. When you like someone, you always subconsciously pay attention to her every move, and Ryan was no exception. After noticing that Zoe seemed to be deliberately avoiding the scallions, he sank his eyebrows and suddenly pulled out a piece of toilet paper and patted it on the table. Under Zoe's astonished gaze, he picked out the chopped scallions from her bowl, one by one. After doing this, Ryan looked at Zoe, who was still wide-eyed, softened his eyebrows and smiled. "Now you can eat." Zoe used the same tone of voice then, and halfway through the meal, red-faced, she quietly nibbled on my ear. "Jess, Ryan's so sweet." I didn't say anything and looked at the bowl of noodles in front of Zoe, somewhat in a trance. After that, Ryan would often ask me about Zoe's favorites in private, and I would tell him everything, playing the role of a good helper, but I never went out with them again. Thoughts were pulled back to the present. I drew back my hand, forcing down the sourness inside me, and lifted my foot to head straight for the utility room. Gathering up some of Machi's daily necessities, I picked up Machi, who was nestled on the couch stretched out, without glancing at Ryan the entire time. I passed Zoe again. I paused in my steps and tugged slightly at the corner of my lips. Ryan's never been much of a sweetie. It's just that the target is you. It was raining on the way back, but luckily I lived close to Ryan's house, only about 10 minutes away. After arriving home and taking a shower, I gave Machi a shower as well, and it was almost 10 o'clock when I was done. Zoe sent me a messenger. "Jess, I really didn't mean to steal Ryan from you this time when I came back." I thought about it for a while and finally replied back to her, "But you guys slept together last night, didn't you?" There was no more reply. Looking at the screen of my cell phone, which was about to turn off, I suddenly thought of something. A few days ago, my best friend came to my side on a business trip, and Ryan and I invited her to dinner. While waiting for the food to be served, my girlfriend's eyes kept darting back and forth between Ryan and me. I was slightly uncomfortable and subconsciously looked up at Ryan, and Ryan, his gaze unchanged, naturally took my hand and wrapped it in his palm. Rubbing it gently, it was like an acknowledgement, or rather, a declaration. The heat spread all along my hand, making my whole heart tingle. It wasn't until the waitress served the food that I was able to catch my breath. Then I heard my best friend discussing with the waiter that she had accidentally ordered the wrong dish, that her friend didn't eat green onions, and then asked the waiter if she could replace the chicken with green onions. I froze for a few seconds, and when I looked up, I met Ryan's eyes. Seeing the flash of surprise in the bottom of his eyes, I lowered my head, only to feel that I was in a mess at that moment. Probably am really unimportant in his mind. Otherwise, why hasn't Ryan realized after all this time that I don't like green onions as much as Zoe does? Should have figured that out a long time ago, after fuming for a while longer. I turned on my computer and prepared to look for an apartment to move to. 6 months ago, I came to the city because of a job transfer. Except for Ryan, I don't have any acquaintances here. And he was the one who helped me find an apartment at that time. He said that this is his Uncle Alex's vacant house, and no one has been living here. Ryan's Uncle Alex is Alexander, a graduate of a prestigious foreign university, with a double master's degree in finance and business administration, but only 3 years older than Ryan. Speaking of which, he and I had a meeting, Ryan's birthday party. I failed to confess my love for him, and even without looking up, I could feel the mocking, sympathetic glances of the people in the room. When I was embarrassed, only Alexander, who was in the corner, gave me a friendly smile. I didn't have long to think about it, but I decided to stay here and asked Ryan for Alexander's messenger, transferring the rent to him every month according to the market rate. Other than that, Alexander and I had no other contact. After staring at the screen for I don't know how long, I looked for a few places with decent locations, added the agent's contact information, and gradually felt a little dizzy in my head, effortlessly rubbing my temples. My vision also began to blur. Later, I simply turned off the computer and completely paralyzed on the sofa, unable to lift half a bit of strength, most likely because of the rain today. INA days, it seemed that someone was approaching. Immediately afterward, a cold touch came from my forehead. When I woke up again, I was lying on the bed in the bedroom, and it was already dawn. The fever seemed to have subsided, and my consciousness was incomparably clear. After staring at the ceiling in awe for a moment, I inclined my head and picked up my cell phone next to the bed. Dozens of unread messengers and missed calls all came pouring out. There were coworkers, girlfriends, housing agents, and even Zoe sent me an "I'm sorry" last night. Ryan was the only one who wasn't there. When I clicked on the chat screen with him, the time stopped 2 days ago. I told him that there was a romantic movie recently released, with a good reputation, and it was good for couples to watch, and asked him if he was going to go to the movie tonight. He didn't hesitate at the time and replied, "Yes, I'll go buy tickets." Zoe came over that night, and Ryan didn't hesitate to stand me up. I waited for him at the movie theater for a long time, sent countless messengers and made countless phone calls, all of which were like a stone dropped into the sea without any response. Forcing myself not to continue to think about it, I lifted the covers and got out of bed to go to the bathroom to wash up. When I went downstairs and passed by the kitchen, I saw a tall and upright figure. The casserole was gurgling and bubbling, a couple of live, raw shrimp sat on the cutting board, and the food blogger's seafood kanji instruction came out of his cell phone handset. The man stood motionless, looking a bit clueless. After a while, he reacted and started cooking the porridge step by step, according to the food blogger's instruction. I noticed that when the blogger mentioned to add green onions in the video, he didn't know if he didn't hear it or not and just skipped that step. Finally realizing that I was looking at him, the man's hand lurched and slowly turned his head to meet my gaze. Jessica. It took me a moment to recognize that it was Alexander. Alexander turns his phone off without changing his face, a smile on his lips. "You just broke your fever. You need to eat something light. Go sit on the couch for a while. The porridge will be ready soon." I subconsciously nodded my head and said okay. Just as I turned around, he called out to me again. "Right, there's one thing that I want to ask your opinion on." I tilted my head slightly. Our company has invested in a new project over here, so I might be coming back to stay for a while. He paused and slowed his tone. "I'm sorry I came back early last night without having a chance to let you know." I stared into his eyes, vaguely remembering the image of him carrying me from the couch back to the bedroom last night, pouring me water, feeding me medicine, and taking care of me almost all night. There was some slight complication in my heart. In fact, except for that one-sided relationship, Ryan seldom mentioned this Uncle Alex to me before, and occasionally mentioned it, but only brought it up in a few words. I really didn't expect him to be quite helpful. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Alexander's eyes moved slightly, and with one hand inserted into his pants pocket and the other naturally hanging down at his side, he softly said, "Will it bother you if I live here?" With that, he suddenly smiled. If you find it inconvenient, I can find another house. I was slightly stunned, immediately remembering that I was going to move out. In a few days anyway, I said, this is supposed to be your house. It doesn't bother me. Alexander was still cooking congee in the kitchen, so I got bored of waiting and took out my phone to swipe through my friends' circles. The first one was posted by Zoe not long ago. The accompanying picture was a photo from a movie theater. The man in the photo was wearing a black suit, with his head slightly hanging down, only showing half of his side face. But I recognized him instantly as Ryan. The movie they were watching today was the same one that I had been denied by Ryan last time. Zoe just happened to capture the last line of the subtitles at the end of the movie, for all the lovers, unconsciously. I had opened the chat screen with Ryan. I tapped into the input box and didn't type a single word until the screen was about to go black. I didn't even have the right to question him. Suddenly, the chat box showed that the other party was typing. A heart suddenly hangs in the throat. The other side quickly sent a sentence. Machi still has some things here. When will you be free to come and get them? It was as if a pot of cold water had been poured over my heart, completely chilling it down. I tugged at the corners of my lips, not knowing what I was expecting at this point. Just as I was about to reply, Alexander came out of the kitchen with a black casserole dish. The porridge is ready. Come and try it. I subconsciously turned off my phone and headed his way. Alexander was holding a spoon to serve the porridge. The freshly cooked seafood porridge was hot. He slowly stirred it first, and then he used a bowl to serve it out a little bit. After he finished the bowl and handed it to me, Alexander sat down opposite to me and frankly spread his hands. You have just seen, this is my first time to cook seafood congee. If the flavor were not good, you just tell me. Next time I will improve. Next time, my hand holding the spoon hangs on the surface of the congee for a few seconds. Then I scooped up a spoonful and tasted it, looked up and smiled sincerely at him. It tastes good. He curled his lips slightly. I think so too. During that time, Alexander took a phone call and said that he had to go back to the office first and might be back late in the evening, telling me not to wait for him for dinner. After he left, I sat in my seat and pondered over his words, finally admonishing myself not to think too much. After finishing the congee, my mom called me on my voice, telling me that Zoe told her mom that she wasn't going to go back and that she wanted to settle on my side. After freezing for a few seconds, I realized the real meaning of the sentence "I'm sorry" that Zoe sent me last night. After thinking about it, I told my mom that I was planning to move, and why mom was silent for a while before she carefully asked, "Did you and Ryan break up?" I froze. Ryan and I had never been together, so how could we talk about breaking up? It's good that we broke up. Why mom sighed, her voice wavering through the cell phone screen. Ryan's condition is good, but he's too arrogant and used to being taken care of. I've seen how you two have gotten along over the years. The last time I went to see you, you were out with Ryan, so I waited for you in front of the house. Mom saw him walk you home. It was late, and you were so afraid of the dark, but he walked on alone, leaving you behind for a long time. But he didn't realize it and didn't look back once. You know how hard it was for mom to see that. My throat tightened. Mom, when you were on the phone with mom the other day, you were helping him clean up the house, right? Don't think mom doesn't know anything, said my mom, a catch in her voice already. Mom would prefer to have someone to take care of you. In the afternoon, I and the housing agent agreed on a time to go to see the house in the hot sun, but a series of several are not very satisfied. On the way back, there was a traffic jam, and the driver was rushed by me to find a shortcut, but I still didn't get back to the neighborhood until around 11 o'clock. It was already dark, and my cell phone was about to run out of battery. The high heels on my feet rubbed my heels raw, but I could not care less about the pain, clenched my fingers, just want to go back quickly. I didn't expect to see Ryan and Zoe around the corner. They were dressed in workout clothes and seemed to have just finished running together. Ryan had a cigarette between his fingers, smoking it absently. Zoe was beside him, talking about something and laughing. Suddenly, Zoe crouches down, as if she's tying her shoes after they've come undone. Ryan takes a few steps and doesn't see her follow, stops and waits for her, walking side by side with her. The dim light stretched and intertwined the silhouettes of the two of them in a way that was rather age-appropriate. I froze in place. watching them walk away step by step. As if, step by step, they walked out of my world, there was a click. There seems to be something in the bottom of the heart, a little tear, collapse, and then a little reorganization, healing. In the end, it became light, this moment. I seemed to have no feelings for Lu He. When I arrived home, it was already 11:30, and the lights in the living room were still on. Alexander was wearing a gray housecoat, sitting on the sofa, concentrating on the computer. Hearing the commotion, he slightly sidled his head and looked over towards the door. Back. This familiar and relaxed tone made me freeze. I looked at him for a moment and asked somewhat hesitantly, "You were waiting for me?" He closed the computer and stood up. A sort of indirect acknowledgement. "Since you're back, I'm going upstairs to bed." I looked at his back and lowered my head in deep thought. For the next few days, since it was a weekday, I could only use my time off work to look at houses. But no matter how late it was, Alexander would be waiting for me in the living room. There were times when it was really too late. He directly asked me to send him the location, and then drove to pick me up. Once when I came back in Alexander's car, I hesitated to tell him that I was moving. He slammed on the brakes. After a while, he said with a serious look on his face, "Next time I'll go with you to look at houses. It's not safe for you to be a girl." I couldn't help but suspect that he had something else in mind for me. But why? Just based on that one meeting? What's more, he's also Ryan's Uncle Alex. On Friday, I finally looked at a house that was closest to the office and in a nice environment, and I was waiting for the weekend to sign the contract. On the way back, Alexander and I were both a little silent. Night after the shower, I went to the kitchen to cut the fruits. A little attention is not focused. Accidentally cut my finger. I screamed in pain, and blood gushed out from the tip of my index finger. Alexander rushed over, held my hand and looked at it, frowning slightly, then let go of my hand. Soon, he returned, ointment and band-aid in hand, and lowered his head to help me with the wound. His fingers were slightly cool, and the ointment was also cool, but inexplicably hot when it touched my fingertips. After treating it, I quickly drew my hand back. "I'm going to blow-dry my hair." It was almost as if I was running away, sitting on the couch with the hair dryer. I was about to blow-dry my hair when Alexander's low voice came from behind me. "I'll do it." He took the hair dryer in one hand and the other was already in my hair, ruffling it gently. The warm wind was blowing against my scalp, and his fingers absently brushed the base of my ears, my neck. Comfortable? His voice was slightly hoarse at the moment. I shivered and immediately stood up, blushing profusely. The hair dryer was touched on the floor, still buzzing. I crouched down to pick it up just as Alexander did. 2. Catching all four eyes off guard, the sound of an access card unlocking came from outside the door. I turned my head. Ryan was staring at us in silence, his face extremely cold. I was slightly disoriented as I watched the obscure emotions under Ryan's eyes. Was he angry at this? After a few moments of delay, I avoided his gaze and reached down to pick up the hair dryer from the floor. Just as I was about to stand up, my feet were a little sore and numb from probably squatting for too long, and I frowned. Suddenly, a large hand grips my arm, then exerts a slight force, pulling me back into a sitting position on the couch. I whipped my head around to see Alexander. He was sitting next to me, staring at Ryan, his face giving away his emotions. "What are you doing over here so late?" "Looking for Jess." Ryan looked at him, his expression cold, his thin lips pursed. "You're back. Why didn't you tell me?" Alexander's tone was warm. "I'm sorry, I forgot." Ryan's face became even more ugly. He clenched his fists and walked straight to me, staring straight at me for a long time before he spoke. "Why haven't you been returning my messages?" I froze, then remembered the last messenger had sent, saying he wanted me to come to his place to get matcha stuff. Hadn't I replied then? With the last few days being so busy with work and house hunting, and coming home to work on cooking with Alexander, it did seem like it had been a long time since ID reached out to him. After a moment of silence, I looked up at him and said, "Sorry, I forgot." As soon as the words left my mouth, a muffled laugh came from beside me. I inclined my head and saw Alexander standing up, his tone relaxed. I could tell he was in a good mood. "You guys talk. I'm going upstairs to get some stuff." Alexander wasn't gone long before Ryan pulled something out of his pants pocket and placed it on the table. Matcha's favorite thing is this. You forgot to take it last time. I looked at the bell on the table and dropped my eyes. This cat bell was a prize Ryan won from a game he played the last time I went to the amusement park with him. It was also the reason I didn't take it with me. I asked calmly, "You came over tonight to give this bell away?" Ryan was silent. Machi happened to come down the stairs. He saw Ryan and meowed, quickly walking over to him and rubbing his calf affectionately. Ryan picked up Machi and sat down on the couch with him, placing Machi on his lap and rubbing his fur one at a time. After a moment he said, "You see, Machi misses me instead." The tone was light, as if it meant something, and as if it meant nothing else. I, however, didn't want to guess any further and asked him point blank, "Does Zoe know you came over to see me?" Ryan frowned. "What's it to her?" I reminded him, "Isn't she scared to be alone in your house this late?" Ryan froze slightly as if he thought of something and raised his eyebrows slightly. "You've been ignoring me for the past few days because of this." I looked at him in silence. He puts Machi down and tries to come and take my hand, but I dodge it, seeing how resistant I was. Dark colors rolled in his eyes and his voice trailed off. "Jess, Zoe suffered a big blow and can't leave me for the time being. That's why I let her stay in my house. I am just trying to take better care of her. That's all." I just felt funny, staring into his eyes, one word at a time. "Taking care of her in bed?" Ryan blushes furiously. Back in my room, I buried my face deep under my pillow and tried to calm down. Uncontrollably, what Ryan had just said kept coming back to haunt me. He said that Zoe found him that night, crying about her fiancé cheating on her. And he accompanied Zoe to drink a lot of wine. He said that night was just an accident. A sudden knock on the door interrupts my thoughts. Opening the door, Alexander leaned against the wall, a bottle of red wine in his hand. I froze for a moment and asked softly, "Ryan's gone?" Alexander shook his head. "There was a sudden rainstorm, so I let him stay here for now." I nodded. It wasn't long before I heard him ask again, "I have something I want to talk to you about. May I come in?" When I saw the bottle of red wine in his hand, my heart suddenly trembled, and I didn't know where to put my eyes for a moment. I glanced around and saw Ryan standing behind him. He was staring at us expressionlessly. The atmosphere was slightly subtle for a moment. "Come in," I heard myself say. I had just closed the door when I turned to see Alexander had sat himself down, poured himself a glass of wine, and took a slow, gentle sip. I didn't say anything, and neither did he. After a moment, he poured a small half glass of red wine into another empty glass, then turned his face sideways to look at me, his voice unhurried. "Want some?" I raised my eyes to meet his. In the past few days, I was always a little mentally exhausted from being so busy. And I couldn't fight. After Alexander noticed, he would drink some red wine with me every night before going to bed, saying that it could relieve fatigue and promote sleep. When he knocked on the door with red wine just now, I didn't think there was anything wrong. But now, I don't know if it's my illusion, but at this moment, he seems to be a little different from the past. The way he looked at me, there was a kind of hidden complexity. My heartbeat accelerated a little, and I slowly walked over and took a small sip of the wine in his hand. "I'll be there at 10 tomorrow morning to sign the contract." My voice was low as I squeezed the glass in my hand. "And you? Didn't you say a few days ago that a client had asked you to talk about business over the weekend, so you don't have to drive me? I'll pack up my stuff tonight and move out tomorrow afternoon. You're nervous now?" Alexander suddenly spoke up. I froze and turned my head to look at him. Alexander stared at me, his face coming closer. "Is it because of me?" I looked into his eyes and my mind went blank for a moment. I opened my mouth and was about to speak when a familiar voice came from outside the door at an inopportune moment. It was Ryan. I jerked to my feet, only to have Alexander take my hand in the next second. He stood up too, his other hand on the side of my waist, and slowly hugged me from behind. Wet, hot breath floated in my ears, tinged with a thin layer of wine, and it didn't take much to realize that the tips of my ears must have been red. I stiffened and heard him speak in a low voice. "Jess, fall in love with me?" I told Alexander that I wanted to think about it. Alexander had been so nice to me. I'd seen it all. He remembers that I don't like green onions, and knows that I'm afraid of the dark, so he'll leave a light on for me. His tenderness and thoughtfulness permeated almost every detail of my life. making it unavoidable and hard to refuse. In the past, when I was around Ryan, I was used to condescending myself to cater to him, humbly and carefully figuring out his moods, as if my breath was bestowed by him. And I was seldom taken care of and cared for in such a way, and because of that, it struck me as too surreal. There was a moment of disappointment in Alexander's eyes, but he quickly reconciled it and smiled. At least it wasn't an immediate rejection. I pursed my lips when I came out with Alexander. I was just in time to see Ryan standing outside the door. His eyes wandered over my face for a moment, and his lips tensed unexpectedly. It took so long to open the door. What were you guys doing in there? The questioning tone made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to explain anything to him. Don't say anything. Are you weak? I sink my face down, not wanting to say anything more to him, and say to Alexander with a sideways glance, "Let's go downstairs." Alexander nods and looks over at Ryan, hooking his lips faintly coming through. Ryan stares at him deadpan, not moving a muscle. I noticed that his hands were clenched into fists at this point, veins bulging as if he was holding something back. Frowning, I stepped in front of Alexander. "Ryan, what are you doing?" Ryan's breath sunk in for a long moment before he gritted his teeth and squeezed out the words, "Jessica, just because I accidentally made a mistake once, you're going to go find another man." Saying that, he paused and suddenly sneered. "Or is it that you've been with him since you moved here 6 months ago?" Bang. The punch that caught him off guard was hard and accurate. Ryan's body took 2 steps directly backward, almost staggering to fall, before he could get his footing. Alexander threw another punch. A trace of blood quickly spilled from the corner of Ryan's lip. He looked coldly at Alexander, pulling at the corner of his mouth, before turning his face to look at me with an obscure look in his eyes. If I had seen him look like that before, I would have been heartbroken and even fallen into self-blame. Now, it was surprisingly calm. "Ryan, I don't understand what you're getting so upset about right now. Even if I did get together with Alexander, you have no business questioning me." I took a deep breath. "We haven't had anything to do with each other since the beginning, haven't we?" Yet, he never opened his mouth and never admitted that I was in a relationship with him, so how could there be a change of heart? Ryan froze, his face turning a little white. Before he walked away, he looked steadily at Alexander, his voice devoid of emotion. "You've been thinking about her for a long time, haven't you?" Alexander didn't answer. He held out his hand to me in front of Ryan, his tone naturally innocent, and hands hurt. I packed all the essentials I was taking into my suitcase and was about to zip it up when Alexander stopped me, and he slipped a large bag of medical supplies in, his tone gentle. "You've been disoriented and injury-prone since you were a child. These are essential." I nodded, suddenly sensing a hint of something wrong. "Since you were a kid?" Alexander's fingers paused and he leapt to his feet. "I have some work to do." I watched him leave, raising an eyebrow slightly. When I was almost done packing, the agent called, saying that there was a problem with the house and discussing with me if I could move in the following weekend. I thought about it for a moment and agreed. I went downstairs with the intention of getting a glass of warm water to drink, but instead I saw Alexander sitting on the couch tapping away on his computer. I walked over to him and glanced at him, thinking that the program on the screen looked familiar and that it seemed to be the one he had been working on for the past few days. I asked, "Isn't this program already done?" Alexander flexed his fingers and tapped the keyboard, his jawline tight and smooth. I added a few more creative points. I stared at the side of his face and let out a casual "oh" before I heard him say, "That way when I show it to the client tomorrow, I'll have a better chance of passing. Maybe it can be finished back sooner." Alexander inclines his head to meet my gaze, curling his lips. "I don't feel comfortable with you moving alone tomorrow afternoon." I froze. It was as if my heart had been tickled by something, a tingling itch spreading and sending shivers through the layers. Looking into his eyes, I remembered something as an afterthought. "I'll move next weekend." Alexander visibly froze, his eyes burning. "Really?" I felt my face and ears burn and looked sideways to avoid his gaze. "Really? There's been a bit of a problem with the agent." He frowned with pleasure. "That's too bad." The next day, Alexander went off to meet a client and probably wouldn't be back until the afternoon. Before he left, he was uneasy and reconfirmed, "You're really not moving today?" I nodded in amusement. "I already told the agent last night." Alexander stared at me for a while, his voice a little dark. Wait for me to come back. I lowered my head, my face inexplicably burned a little, and let out a soft I called my mom at noon. She thought I was still sad about Ryan and spoke very softly, as if she was afraid of stimulating my emotions. I was a bit helpless, and repeatedly said that I had already let go, but she just didn't believe me, and finally even said that she wanted to introduce me to someone. I stroked my forehead and was about to refuse, when she hung up directly and then sent me someone's business card. Have to say, very familiar. Really familiar. I sent a screenshot of the chat with my mom to Alexander, and there was silence on the other side for up to 10 minutes. Me, explain. The dialogue box kept showing that the other person was typing. Me. Alexander slowly typed out a line. Why don't I come back and tell you in person? I agreed. It was around 6 in the afternoon when Alexander came back. He didn't seem to be disturbed by what happened at noon. His expression was frank, and he smiled at me the moment he met my gaze. Did you eat? I asked. He sighed slightly, his tone sounding a little aggravated. Too busy. Haven't eaten all day. I frowned and turned around, heading for the kitchen. I'll go ahead and simply cook you a bowl of noodles to fill your stomach. My wrist was suddenly pulled. Alexander came over and looked down at me with a burning gaze. I lied to you. I've already eaten. When I met his gaze, my whole face seemed to burn. The hot temperature spread all the way to the bottom of my heart. That it took half a day to find my voice and hurriedly change the topic. How do you know my mom? He mused. Probably when I was very young. I looked at him suspiciously. Alexander's lips curved. Actually, you knew me at a very early age too. Probably because it was too silly to see me staring blankly at him at this point. Alexander rubbed the palm of my hand and finally told me, when I was a kid, our families lived close to each other. And my mom and your mom went to high school together. So we went back and forth quite often. I was very impressed with you back then. Why mom always asked me to take you out. One time I didn't pay attention to the time and waited until it was dark. I still remember. At that time you clutched my hand tightly, your body shivered slightly, but you were very stubborn, and you didn't say anything even though your tears were about to fall, and that's when I realized that you were afraid of the dark. My heart suddenly trembled. As far as I can remember, there was a neighbor who had a good relationship with our family, but I was too young to remember the details. Later, we moved away, and the contact between the two families was broken. It wasn't until a year ago, when my mom went to a high school reunion, that they reconnected. Somehow, my mom pushed my messenger to your mom. And Auntie would sometimes post pictures of you in her circle of friends, and occasionally she would mention a few things about you when she chatted with me. Now that I think about it, it was probably to set us up. Finally, Alexander looked me in the eyes, his tone low but serious, and Jess, Ryan was right last night. I've been thinking about you for a long time. I looked straight at him, and something seemed to break inside me. Before I could react, Alexander wrapped his arms around my waist, rubbing his fingers on my waist, his warm breath falling on my ear. Jess, don't move away. Okay. I was instantly electrocuted, as if my body was tingling, and my heartbeat was so fast that it almost exploded. Confused, I grabbed his shirt tightly, moved my lips to say something. Zoe suddenly called me. The ambiguous atmosphere came to an abrupt end. Zoe said Ryan came back from the rain last night, drank all night, and by noon he had a high fever, which also triggered a stomachache. He wouldn't take his medication and kept saying my name on his lips. She whimpered on the phone. Jess, I just can't help it. Can you come over and see him? I turned my head to Alexander. He took my hand. I'll go with you. When we got to Ryan's house, Alexander didn't enter. You guys have a nice chat. I look at him for a moment and assure him, be right out. He smiled. Good. I walked into the bedroom just in time to meet Ryan's gaze as he raised his eyes. His whole body looked tired, his lips were pale, and thin beads of sweat were oozing from his forehead, making that face look more and more pale and weak. I pursed my lips. Why won't you take your medication? Ryan was silent for a while and spoke in a hard voice. I'm sorry. I looked at him without saying a word. I did sound like an asshole last night with what I said. I'm sorry, okay? I accept your apology. I whispered, take your pills. Zoe's worried about you. What about you? Ryan looked straight at me. Are you worried about me? I sighed and turned around. I'll go first. Jess, Ryan called out to me, his voice coming out slowly. I used to think I loved Zoe, but now I realize it was just a youthful reluctance. Obviously, it's always been you who's been there for me. His voice had gone so low it was indescribable, and almost word for word he said, "Jess, I love you. But I don't love you anymore." I looked him in the eyes, my voice wavering. "Ryan, no one is going to stay where they are forever." I didn't expect Zoe to be standing in the bedroom doorway. She was pale, haggard, and her eyes were swollen. I think she heard my conversation with Ryan. "Jess," her voice was husky and thick with exhaustion, "you won after all." I looked at her speechlessly. Zoe lowered her eyes. "Last night Ryan came home, stifling his drink, one after the other. No matter how much I tried to talk him out of it, then I tried to get him into bed and he pushed me away." I'll never forget the look in his eyes, full of disgust, not a trace of affection. "You know what he said to me?" She paused and tugged at her lips in self-deprecation. "He said, with red eyes, that was it that night, that he couldn't do it again, that you wouldn't want him." The week passed quickly. Zoe had moved out of Ryan's house and Ryan didn't make a point of visiting me again, only occasionally. When I came back from grocery shopping with Alexander, I would see him in the neighborhood garden. As for whether it was a coincidence or not, I don't want to find out anymore. On Friday, Alexander said it was not a good idea to stay at home all the time, so he wanted to take me to exercise. When I arrived, I realized that his sport was bungee jumping. I looked at him and could probably guess what he was doing bringing me here. The person in charge quickly helped us with a series of safety measures and gave us some instructions on how to bungee jump professionally. "Scared?" Alexander asked. I smiled. No, the moment I jumped, it was like my brain was emptied and my heart stopped beating. All those people and things that I thought were important, all those obsessions that I thought I would never be able to let go of for the rest of my life, all of them disappeared with the hissing and screaming. That moment. What was clear in my mind was Alexander's gentle smile with encouragement. The second I jumped, it was already 9 o'clock at night when I got home. I got cleaned up, lay down on my bed, picked up my cell phone and called the agent to tell him that I wasn't moving and that I wasn't asking for a refund of my deposit to make up for it. Then I messaged Alexander, telling him about it. Soon after, there was a knock at the door. When I opened the door, Alexander looked at me quietly. He must have just gotten out of the shower. His hair and eyes were wet. After a while, his throat rolled and his voice was hoarse. "Have you thought about it?" I looked at him and realized that he was asking about the last time I said I was thinking about being with him. "Yeah, I've thought about it," Alexander asked in a low voice. "What about you and Ryan?" I sounded sure. "I won't have anything to do with him ever again." The corners of his lips curved, as if remembering something, and he said, "That's not good either." I froze for a moment and reacted with a dumbfounded laugh. "Fine. I'll let my aunt and uncle be my aunt and uncle. Meet the parents extra." When I was finally on vacation near the end of the year, Alexander said he wanted to take me home to meet his parents. All the way there, I acted calm, but when I parked the car and was about to get off, my hand seemed to be a little out of control, and I couldn't get out of the seatbelt. Alexander pressed my hand and whispered, "I'll do it." After saying that, he pushed open the car door and got out of the car, came around to my side, opened the car door, and leaned over to help me unbuckle my seatbelt. Looking at the soft and serious lines of his face, somehow my heart, which had been tense all day, gradually relaxed. I was even interested in joking. "Will Auntie be shocked to see me? After all, even my mom says that I've changed a lot from when I was a kid." Alexander happened to unbuckle his seatbelt at this moment, his voice low and gentle. "Whether I was a kid or now, I look good." I froze slightly and moved over to kiss him with a smile. He held his position, pressing gently on the back of my neck as he slowly deepened the kiss. I closed my eyes tightly, my fingertips unconsciously clutching his shirt so tightly I could barely breathe. The evening breeze leapt in along the crack of the open car door, and Alexander released my lips, panting slightly in my ear. "Well, do it again tonight." I blushed all of a sudden, and my head was spinning until I followed Alexander to the front door of the house. Swiping his access card, Alexander looked down slightly at me and said, "Go on in." When I entered, the floor had probably just been mopped and was a little slippery. I didn't stand still and stumbled a few steps before falling backward, and Alexander immediately reached out his hand and swept me steadily into his arms. Jess is coming. A very gentle voice came from the front. A woman walked through the foyer, with a kind face and some resemblance to Alexander between her eyebrows. I answered and went forward to greet her. "Hello, Auntie." Alexander's mom's line of sight lingered on Alexander and I for a moment, and responded in a loud voice. "Good, good. Come sit in." The living room. She just took 2 steps, as if she remembered something. "Right, Jess? Yesterday I saw you forwarded a video on how to make braised fishtail to your friends. Today I asked my aunt to make this dish. Let's see if it's to your liking later." Alexander narrowed his eyes at me. Circle of friends? I froze for a few seconds. After I got together with Alexander, I asked my mom for Alexander's mom's messenger and often asked her about things related to Alexander. Only Alexander didn't know. Thinking about it, I avoided his gaze slightly, but my tone was reasonable. "No." Alexander gave a low chuckle, "Of course." I walked to the living room. I noticed 2 people sitting on the couch. One of them looked like Alexander's dad, and the other was Ryan. If sensing something, Ryan raised his eyes slightly, just in time to collide with my line of sight. And the next second, he stood up violently, looking at me with obscure eyes. Alexander's mom stepped aside and explained that Ryan's mom had asked him to drop something off and that he would probably stay the night and go back in the morning. I subconsciously looked at Alexander. His eyes lingered on Ryan's face for a split second before he naturally took my hand and moved forward to sit at the couch. I could clearly feel Ryan's eyes on our interlocked hands. After a while, Alexander's mom and dad said they were going to go to the kitchen to see if the food was ready, leaving us to talk by ourselves. I wasn't too uncomfortable and talked to Alexander about where we were going to hang out for the next few days. As we talked, something occurred to me. "Let's go on the vertical roller coaster tomorrow." Alexander looked tight. "Okay. You play, I'll wait for you down here." I stared at him and teased. "Obviously you're afraid of heights, but last time you went bungee jumping with me." In order to give me courage, he jumped first, but when he went up, his face was white. And he lied to me and said that it was blown by the cold wind. "Why don't you dare to do it this time?" Alexander looked surprised. "How do you know I'm afraid of high? My mom told you." I didn't answer his question. Instead I said seriously, "Next time you won't be allowed to do that." Alexander looked at me. The smile on his lips spread out. "Good." He picked up a petal of orange on the table and was about to hand it to me, when Ryan, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly said something coldly. "How long have you guys known each other? And you're bringing Jess to meet the parents so soon?" Alexander glanced at him and said, "Not long, just a decade or 2. Ryan was stunned and was about to say something when Alexander's mom came over and said it was time to eat. The dinner table. Alexander's mom was serving me food and talking about Alexander and me when we were kids. I kept my head down as I ate, catching a glimpse of Ryan's slight stiffness and dismay across the table. "You don't know. At that time, NVG especially liked to play with you. Every time you came over, he pretended to be fine and came out from his room with a tone of indifference, saying, 'Mom, I've finished my homework.'" I couldn't hold back my laughter and raised an eyebrow at Alexander beside me. "Really?" Alexander's hand gave a slight beat. Didn't answer. Picked up a piece of braised fish tail and put it into my bowl. Coughed softly. "Let's eat." After dinner, Alexander said he was going out to do some shopping, and not long after, Ryan went out too. When he came back, Alexander was alone. He told me that Ryan had an emergency at work and had driven back. By the time we got back to Alexander's apartment, it was already late. After taking a shower and drying my hair, I saw Alexander half sitting, half lying on his bed, playing with his cell phone. I looked at him for a moment, then moved over and jumped into his arms, interlocking my hands at his neck. "What did you just say to Ryan?" Alexander reaches over and secures my waist, his fingers running over my waistband. "Nothing." I stared into his eyes. My heart was beating so fast. My voice was muffled. "I don't believe." Just opened his mouth, his lips covered up. "Jess." He hooped my face, pressed against my lips, hoarsely murmured, said good night. It wasn't until later in the night that Alexander told me what had happened with him and Ryan. He went to the supermarket to buy that thing, picked out the right model. And when he was checking out, Ryan bumped into him. Ryan's eyes instantly reddened, and he smiled bitterly, as if he hadn't expected it, but also as if he had thought of it before he left. Ryan asked Alexander to tell me that he would never bother me again, but So what? I don't care anymore.